Chicanos are a very interesting set of Mexican Americans that fall within a dysphoria that really has no monolithic rubric to existing. Besides the fact that in whatever society that they're put in, we're speaking of the American one, their adjacentness to whiteness and within their skin tone and their cultural backgrounds will be what maintains their quality of life. I do hate to be brutal, but I do also want to have open discussions now about rippling effects of certain ideologies within the Mexican nationality that I feel no longer serves what is currently being understood if you identify as a Mexican. And I think too, we are seeing more Chicanos identify as indigenous in a way that is different than prior generations. I feel like we need to have a conversation about that. I think it's important for people to see somebody that looks like me acknowledge the set of privileges that I have within my dysphoria, because it's often as though someone my skin tone with my set of attributes would take advantage or almost commodify certain aspects for connection. And look, I'm not here to really judge anyone because I have been on multiple journeys trying to feel comfortable within my identity. But what I do want y'all to do is to not be disrespectful to others while you're doing that, and to also not commodify or even assume authority within a group that y'all do not have a cultural tie that makes you an authoritative figure within that conversation. And I'm talking about attitudes that are deeply ingrained from nationalism, from the creation of art forced upon nationality, because not in the case of everyone was it forced upon, or wasn't it a conscious choice to invest in over the years to again maintain a quality of life as a Mexican person. So before I can understand the ideologies of Aztlan and Chicanismo, I need to understand the actions that took place prior to the creations of those ideologies. And I also need to understand the types of people who made them. So I hope you enjoyed this video. And yeah, it's been a while and I'm sorry, but I hope this makes up for it. The Chicano movement is summarized by pivotal events that resulted in many different strides made by the Mexican and Mexican American population. The Crusade for Justice would be an example of the Mexican Americans' desire to actualize in the Anglo-Saxon society that they were put in. In every sector of the Mexican American life during the 1960s, you will see a pull and tug on clarification of equal rights. Not to be considered a black or white person in the American society became an interesting position to be put in. In this time period, we lose generational connection to identity, but overall see a group form one on their own with what would surround them. One of the famous quotes being brought into online circulation is by Chavela Vargas, said during an interview, "Los mexicanos nos damos donde los rechingada gana." Mexicans are born wherever the fuck they want. If you're reading this or hearing it and have knowledge of the Chicano movement, I think you'd be interested to hear someone describe the Crusade for Justice as a stride towards actualization in an Anglo-Saxon society, because it would tell you their bias within the thesis. But I say it generally, not as in an incorporation of this quote we think of when speaking about American culture, black culture being the stitches and most of the material, but because it gives enough space for me to communicate the nuance that resulted in the same kind of conclusion. Mexican Americans are a subcategory of folk who have a specific set of privileges that have been afforded by these events and organizations and organizers involved in the betterment of quality of life for minorities.
Les habla la esposa del senador John F. Kennedy, candidato a la presidencia de los Estados Unidos. En estos tiempos de tanto peligro, cuando la paz mundial se ve amenazada por el comunismo.
The Viva Kennedy campaign in 1960 had been a watershed in the development of the middle-class political organizations, since it marked the entry of their leadership in the area of national politics for the first time, with the exception of California. Viva Kennedy clubs had successfully mobilized the American vote for Kennedy. After Kennedy's election to the presidency, these leaders expect that some of their own would receive high-level appointments in the Kennedy administration. These expectations were frustrated. The Mexican-American organizations were ignored by Kennedy and the Democratic Party leaders. The leadership of MAMPA bitterly criticized the Kennedy administration at the organization's fourth annual convention in 1963, just days before Kennedy's assassination in Dallas. Edward Rollbaugh criticized Kennedy for not doing anything he had promised during the course of the Viva Kennedy campaign of 1960. Quote, within the quote, "It has taken the Kennedy administration 3 years to appoint a coordinator on the Latin American affairs and has done nothing for the Mexican American in the Southwest who helped the president get elected." This seed of reality planted a movement that would become more in fruition, as Corky had went through a similar display of disenchantment with the Democratic Party after his attempt to gain employment in several political offices. After he lost bids to become a state senator and the mayor of Denver in 1960, he campaigned for John F. Kennedy's presidential run and worked to attract Chicano voters to the Democratic Party. By 1965, the mayor of Denver appointed Gonzales director of the local chapter of the Neighborhood Youth Corps, which provided job training for poor and underprivileged young people. However, he was fired the following year after he had been accused of hiring too many Latinos. There are several different versions of this story online. One is that he was accused of hiring too many Mexicans. He was accused of forming a protest against Operation for making racist remarks. So I'm not quite sure, but he just was fired. Quote, Gonzales first ran for political office in 1955 at an unsuccessful bid for the 5-point city council position. Elvin Caldwell eventually won the seat. In 1960, he campaigned for John F. Kennedy's coordinating the Viva Colorado campaign in Colorado. During this time, he also served as Colorado's first Mexican-American Democratic district captain. At the same time, he made an unsuccessful bid for a seat in the Colorado legislature. In 1964, Gonzales ran unsuccessfully for Colorado state senator. His final political effort was in 1967 when he ran for Denver's mayor against Thomas Kerrigan. Again, defeated, Gonzales sued Kerrigan for violating an old Denver campaign law, but he lost. To back things up, in 1964, following extreme police brutality from the Denver police for the past 30 years, essentially, Corky would have to remind Kerrigan, the mayor at the time, which this is a quote, that in May of 1964, a jury had recommended abolishing the Police Internal Affairs Bureau and established a citizen review board. I could only imagine the tension between Kerrigan and Corky, as after the election, this is where Corky lost to Kerrigan. Would he continue to be involved in aspects that he campaigned on? Kerrigan, by then, had fallen through on their campaign promises. Quote, Viva reprinted part of an April 22 Denver Post article by Tom Gavin detailing the mayor's 1963 campaign promises to establish an independent police review board to review accusations of brutality. Kerrigan complained, "It would seem that a body completely separate from the police department could receive and hear grievances with a greater detachment than a unit of police force. I would strongly urge the creation of such a board in Denver and feel it would not only protect the policemen from unfair charges, but I would strongly urge the creation of such a board in Denver and feel that it would not only protect the policemen from unfair charges, but give the public an opportunity to present grievances against improper police action." Right. Los Volunteerismos was created in 1963 as a result of the police killing of Alberto Salazar. Corky transitioned into politics to me can be understood by his bail bonds business. This business would have him join the Salazar's family on their way to the jail to bail out Alberto. When they met Alberto, they found him incoherent and unable to sign his name. On March 10th, he was reported by an inmate nearby to be struck by another jailer and then thrown into the cell by an officer. On May 5th of 1963, Gonzales had held a meeting where, quote, 500 people showed up proclaiming in a single voice that the investigation of the purported police brutality remains an issue for the people to see and hear until just action had been taken. Gonzales would be making critiques of Thomas Kerrigan, the mayor of Denver at the time's position on disciplinary action towards police brutality. Ultimately, the officers would be acquitted charges on the base of an accident because it was proven in court that Salazar had an abnormally thin skull. Once let go from the position appointed by Kerrigan, he would be a pioneer from the anti-war movement that would erupt in the later half of the 1960s and 70s. In 1966, this would be the year Corky opened up a food bank and started to provide services like job training, but also he would be presenting a speech where young John Hotto would be present. John Hotto later became acquainted with Corky and was invited to Los Volunteermos. The police would be reaping the benefits from the Law Enforcement Assistance Act that was passed in 1965. And of course, this would be passed right after the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And as well, the other police would benefit from the Safety Act passed in 1968. Quote, President Johnson signed the Safe Street and Criminal Act on June 19, 1968. In his statement on the signing, he highlighted 4 measures to help fight crime. So to summarize it, he authorized $400 million in federal grants over a 2-year period. He created a National Institution of Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice to begin research, and development in science. He established a pioneer aid to education program of forgiving college loans and tuition grants to attract better law enforcement officers. He provided greatly expanded training for state and local police officers. He permitted federal funds to be used to supply police salaries and to encourage the specialized training of community service officers whose mission will be to ease tensions in ghetto neighborhoods. Regarding Corky, so a quote would be, by August 6, 1966, Chicano activist Corky Rodolfo Gonzales addressed a group believed to be the Denver Stop the War Committee with a speech declaring peace is dignity. Now, the speech goes as follows. What the American people should recognize and evaluate is that the political doctrine is not the issue in Vietnam. It is not the real issue here at home. The real issue is economics. At present, the economic stabilization of our country is dependent upon the war in Vietnam. The ruthless financial lords of Wall Street are the only real recipients of the tremendous profits to be made by the conducts of a wanton, ruthless war. The great and powerful corporations who controlled our industries, who control the purse strings of the nations, calmly play a chess game to live of the innocent American boys, confused and bewildered Vietnamese men, women, and children for green dollars that do not show the red stain of blood, the anguish and the torment of the grieving parents, the guilt of the rape of a weaker nation. Economics also plays an important role on the roulette wheel of fate for those who must die representing us on the battlefront. Check the casualties, check the injured, check the entire number of drafted young men, and then compare their financial status of their parents. And check the ethnic background. Check to see which minorities are dying for a cause they cannot see or understand. Then you will understand why economic plays a major role in this and any war. The poor, the minorities who face a life of discrimination. To provide perspective from 1967 to 1968, college campuses from Los Angeles to Texas and Colorado created organizations to help aid and support their own individual labor strikes or student walkouts. Some of these are called Mayo, UMass, and the Mexican American Student Association. And these organizations would branch off into chapters that sometimes had slightly difference in name and goals. From UCLA, Berkeley, and Boulder in Colorado, we saw mass organizing towards education, identity, labor, and economics. In 1967, Rodolfo had a poem that was spread from all 3 organizations titled I Am Joaquin. A heap load of theater, painting, and poetry was solidifying a Chicano identity that would be regional specific. For Colorado, the churches would hosts the Mexican immigrants' first generation and Mexican American population. Healthcare clinics and schools were created as a result of organizing efforts from these parliaments. St. Khadijah's and Sacred Hearts on Lumber Street, St. Joseph on Santa Fe Street are all there to this day and hold historical importance to the Mexican community of Denver.
Quiero que lo sientas para nuestra gente, la raza de ese vato. That's our people home. Make us proud, okay?
What you stand for? You got no fucking idea what La Raza means. It's about our people out there, working, surviving with pride and dignity. That's Raza, not lying and murdering.
Holy Land by Christopher Columbus. He gave this, Columbus gave this land the name Land of Grace and Holy Land, because his dream was to use America to save Jerusalem. His dream of Christopher Columbus was to rescue the Holy Sepulchre. But San Joaquin has never been substituted by any other town. There's nothing but Christian Israelites living here, so-called Spanish and Mexicans and Chicanos and Latinos, but we are Christian Israelites, right, by blood, not by religion.
All right, I know today you describe yourself. Your analysis is predicated upon an interpretation of the historic Spanish land grants. What I've always wanted to ask you, what is your response to those who argue that the King of Spain had no right to grant lands to Spanish settlers, lands which were not his in the first place, but were his only by conquest?
Well, nations abide by international law.
On June 5th, 1967, Reyes Tijerina and his corresponding organization, the Alzancias of Merced, would flood the Rio Arriba County Courthouse with the goal in mind to retrieve arrested members of the Alzancias and to arrest the court attorney Alfonso Sanchez, who, according to my research, was involved in the prohibition of Tijerina's events to organize towards the Mexican-American land grants. This event would ultimately bring attention to the Hispanic Mexican-American land grant struggle Tijerina was taking and promoting.
Texas, New Mexico, and California. Our roots, the pillars of our culture are here, the towns. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which gave United States sovereignty over this area, guarantees the protection, recognition of our property. Our property has never, as towns, have never been recognized. Only Indian towns have been recognized in New Mexico, but not one single Spanish-built town or Mexican-built town has been recognized. As long as the towns are not recognized, we don't feel that we have been recognized as citizens. We have the titles, perfect titles, to satisfy any law.
Now would help me understand some underlying ideologies and cultural sentiments that came across in Mexican-American culture. Now, in Colorado, the birthplace of the Chicano Youth Liberation Conference, Aztlan would be an emerging ideology or place sentiment from Alberto Alorista. A poem that he shared would eventually sprout a whole mythical ideology. And 3 years prior, the organizer of this event, Corky, would have personally caravanned out to New Mexico to support the Alzancias and the Tijerina struggle while Tijerina was in jail. Tijerina's struggle for land was understood behind his ideology that the land was given by prophetic access, because he believed that the descendants of the Hispano families that settled were Israelites. He considered himself an Israelite, but not in the sense to be believed currently. On March 25th, 1967, Reyes Lopez Tijerina sent a letter to Gonzales, translated from Spanish. It reads, "Corky, this summer the people will take over San Joaquin del Rio de Chama once and for all. The people, or as I call them, the sons of San Joaquin, are aroused and full of adoration and longing, not ever seen in the history of New Mexico. The people of New Mexico have moved together in a miraculous manner, which causes joy in the souls of the natives, but great fear and terror in the strangers who arrived. And those militant ones from Denver who wish to be present are invited and can personally see the sons of San Joaquin. We would like it if there could be one witness from among you so that this person could give you a first-hand details of it all." Reyes Lopez Tijerina would be a religious activist in New Mexico who found himself researching the ability to reclaim land grants to him and several other Mexicans and Spanish families, the Hispano-Mexican subcategory. And this same subcategory would also be in Colorado. Talking about several land grants, but specifically the Alliance, it's called the Alliance of the Federal of Mercedes in English, protested the broken treaty and focused on two major land grants, the San Joaquin del Rio de Chama, Quiara Armeria. And Reyes would have made his own commune, Arizona, with 17 other families before he focused his energy on these land grants. In June of 1967, Gonzales would have caravans to New Mexico in support of the, which they're called Alelancistas, like the Alliance, who had been without a leader for 5 months at that point because Tijerina was arrested. Another video on Reyes would do good to understand the label as an important Chicano activist. But to summarize it, Tijerina had fought for land grants. He had made his own commune as a religious leader and was in jail for rushing a courthouse and trying to make a citizen arrest on the people who arrested his men, I believe. But I need to make a video about that, so don't quote me. On August 31st of 1967, Gonzales, accompanied by a Crusade for Justice Vice Chairman Emilio Dominguez, was invited to Chicago to attend the National Conference for New Politics. And it's noted that in the book titled Crusade for Justice of the Militancy of the Chicano Movement by Ernesto Vigil, that after the conference, the FBI had surveilled many of the attendees. Before we get into this conference, or more about that, because I feel like we could expand, we need to talk about the Chicano Youth Liberation Conference that ultimately solidified a growing momentum towards Mexican American culture identity as displayed in popular movies like Blood In and Blood Out or American Me. And I have to pose the question to you, do you feel Chicanos can nationalize in America as a sovereign group of people? And do all Chicanos across the board share the same struggle? Okay, now in La Viva Raza by Yolanda Alencina, nationhood is understood by 5 commonalities: common language, culture, territory, economic life, and historical involvement in a community. Specifically, in Denver, Colorado, the Mexican community history will run as far back as 500 years. A deep Hispano presence would be evident when going into the creations of the town's economy. But I wonder if it would be kind of like a mix of folk who were alongside Corky and organizing in the Crusade for Justice, as far as Hispano Mexicans or Mexicans that had immigrated after the 1900s that were there for work. The reason I bring up Reyes Tijerina is because between Ernesto Vigil's book about Chicano militancy and Yolanda Alencina's, there's a crucial component of energy that is to be explained with these historical events, but not as an explanation of an excuse in my writing, but at least for me to understand what comes alongside cultural sentiments brewed in this time of history. Like, what is Chicano's infatuation with indigenous ideology that makes it mirror white tendencies? If you've made it this far in the video, thank you. Thank you. It's definitely gonna be a 2-parter. This is 30 minutes. Took me so long to figure out the confidence to put this together. The next episode is Journey to Aztlan. It's gonna need its own. I also just don't have time right now to fit in Aztlan. Look, I don't have time to fit in everything in one video. Like, I have to clean this kitchen. So I'm about to clean this kitchen and then I'm gonna start researching for the next video, because I've given it my all. giving it my all. Thank you. Of Denver. February of 1969, 3 years before the murder of Luis Martinez, Guadalupe Priseno would be striking at the Kitayama operation, where primarily Mexican women had been working in their floral department under horrendous working conditions. In addition to long hours and no overtime pay, the employees were forced to work in humid, muddy floral nurseries, often leading to accidents and health complications. Instantaneously, the police were notified once management had made aware of this employee organizing to take action and gaining better work conditions. It was after the first meeting the participants would come to work and see the police officers in the plants. The Chicano organizers had a 4-step plan. That first, they attempted to gain employee and community support for the union, though they were aware that the owner of the plant, Rey Kitayama, would likely reject unionization of his employees. Next, the women organized a plan for a general strike, creating picket signs and designating different women to various positions in the picket line. That NFWO meticulously planned out the strike. The third step involved gaining political and legal support in the border community. And this is all summarized from the history of Colorado.org. That Briseno would have been eventually dismissed, and that the NFO voted to begin the strike after the dismissal on July 1st of 1968. It would be 45 strikers that would gain local and national support, and that's when Cesar Chavez helped out the NFWO as well. And that's as well when Corky, Gonzales, and the Chicano students of the University of Boulder, Colorado would join the strikers. As an inexperienced labor organizer, Briseno made sure to contact lawyers in order to follow a legal path of the unionization. Finally, they established the specific demands of their strike. The women argued that the certain jobs at the plant warranted higher pay. In addition, they laid out demands for health care and seniority benefits. The strike led to some of their demands being met, as somewhat better work environment for the people with continued employment. In 1970, Corky would have already worked alongside and coordinated with Cesar Chavez, Farm Worker Union, the Black Panther Party, and Southern Christian Leadership Conference to help with the Committee of Poor People campaign. Many who worked in the Indian movement also took part in the Crusade for Justice. Police admitted to working with the FBI in the surveillance of the things like the operation of Wounded Knee. Leading up to the student walkout of 1969, Corky would be called to the action of the West End High School. Prior to the demands of the students being presented, there would be an incident between teacher and student that can explain the atmosphere for Mexican students. It's important to note the age ranges of people who are behind the leaders I'm speaking of were also student age ranges from this high school to college. A summary from the West Side Reader dated March 1st, 1969 would give us an idea of the school environment within the demands list. The following demands of the Chicano students at West High School were presented to the Denver School Board at the meeting with the city officials Friday afternoon in the mayor's office. James D. Voorhees, president of the board, said the board would consider carefully all the points in these demands that are within the board's jurisdiction and would do all possible to improve the situation at West High. These were the demands. 1. That no West High School students involved in the boycott be removed or dismissed. Earl Paul, W.H. principal, said Friday night this request will be met. 2. Dismissal of Harry B. Schaefer, who has proven to be a racist teacher. We request that such an inadequate teacher be fired. Ms. Schaefer will be transferred to another school. 3. That through the Office of Education, West High enforce the inclusion of our people's history, our culture, language, ethic, and our contribution to this country. That bilingual education from elementary school through college become a reality. That our cultural rights, as cited in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo of 1848, be recognized and abided by. 5. That the West High neighborhood complex in the new school system have its own school board with no at-large members. 6. That Chicano literature be provided in the West High School libraries. 7. That teachers become more aware of the social and economic problems of the community surrounding West High School. 8. That the teachers refrain from counseling West High School students to join the armed forces. 9. That the class size at the West High School be reduced so teachers can be more effective in the classroom. That team teaching approach be used. The summer of 1968, the Crusade for Justice would have hosted a summer program called the Freedom School, where Mexican and American history was taught. It prompted an interaction from 2 students in the high school with Harry Schaefer. Janine Perez and Priscilla Martinez would correct their teacher's pronunciation of their surname alongside correcting the teacher on certain historical events taught by him. It just led up to the teacher invalidating them and being racist in the classroom. Now, there would be a debate scheduled between the Crusade for Justice against the high school teacher, but it is said that the Crusade for Justice showed up, but Schaefer would have made an exit. Now, this is a quote. "This linguistic and cultural history is not taught in school, nor was it in the 1969 when Janice and Perez were harassed by their teachers." Frustrated, Harry Schaefer challenged the Crusade for Justice members to a debate the following day in class. Ernesto Vigil and the others from the Crusade for Justice arrived the following day to discuss their culture, history, and language, but Harry Schaefer retreated to the teacher's lounge and refused to address them, leaving the Crusade for Justice to present their ideas in the classroom in his absence. The Crusade for Justice then asked students and their parents to document the racist remarks and actions of Schaefer. This is a quote. Corky requested a meeting on February 27th at the West High School with the principal, where 20 students and parents presented the facts and demands that Schaefer be removed after the principal agreed. However, several days later, the administration changed their mind and refused to transfer or fire Schaefer. On Wednesday, March 19th, fed up with the inaction, proposed a spontaneous walkout on the following day at 9 a.m., estimating 50 to 75 students would participate. The following morning, over 300 people, including other Crusade for Justice members, parents, and families, showed up on the steps of Denver's West High. Corky Gonzales and student leaders began giving speeches promoting solidarity. On January's print of El Gallo, a request for attendees would be the group organizing for the Chicano Youth Conference in Denver.